Videos you're about to see are a collection of videos that I've already done. Now, I've put these into categories. So in other words, out of the, at the moment, 900 odd videos I've done, I cover many different subjects from spirits, Bigfoots, aliens, ancient aliens, etc. So the video you're about to watch is a collection of just one subject. In other words, Anunnaki, pyramids, Egypt, whatever it is that you're just about to watch. Now, you can watch them all on YouTube free of charge, no problem at all. They're in sets of 5, as you see here, or they're actually in sets of 50, so you can actually watch them in one whole go, right from video number 1. But you can also go to my website and find the links and podcasts, etc. there. And the website address is ourtruehistory.co.uk, and you can again find the videos straight through there. And there's some special ones there which are also on YouTube. But if you're after something that's not on YouTube or on my website, I do have a Patreon page called Our True History, and it's at the moment it's got 76 other videos. Now, some of these are actually proper documentaries that I make. So there's a documentary called Everything You Need to Know About Spirits. There's a documentary called Everything You Need to Know About Mermaids. The spirit one is 3 hours long, fully edited properly, etc. So if you are interested in more of my kind of projects, or what do I call them, videos, feel free to go to my Patreon page. And also ones that are not categorized on YouTube, even though they're free on YouTube, but the ones that are not categorized, if you click here, you'll see category videos on my Patreon page, and it's got other ones, so it just calls part videos. So basically the same as what you're watching now, but may not be on YouTube. I've put the category ones on Patreon, but again, you can watch them all in order on YouTube or my website free of charge. But Patreon, unfortunately, you have to pay. But that's why I sit and make very long documentaries about everything you need to know, etc. So hopefully I'll see you there. Anyway, enough of me waffling. Enjoy this whatever it is you're watching, because I'm using the same intro for all the videos. Thank you. This was your god, regardless of whether or not you even believe in religion. So this would have been Neptune or Poseidon, either Greek or Roman, or the original person, which because of their longevity of life, was actually Enki, which was a Anunnaki god. So that's one of the same, the god of water. So the Anunnakis, I'm just going through this because some people still get confused on who people are and what they are in relation. So there was 12 gods which were Anunnaki, and the Anunnaki race is actually called the Elohim. So there was 12 Elohim that called themselves gods, Enki, Enlil, the dad, and so on. Now these were 8 to 10 foot tall, and they were, although they were Elohim Anunnaki, the Anunnaki, which translates those from heaven, came to earth, but we have to replace heaven for space because we got it wrong when we translated it many years ago. So the Anunnaki are just workers. They're just normal, like we are, me and you, who's watching this now. We're not gods. We're not royal. So these were, the royals, because he was a prince. So they called themselves gods here on earth. So the Anunnaki are literally just workers, really, or just normal people that live did live on Nibiru, which was their home planet. So we can tell all of that because of the elongated skulls that we found that belong to Anunnaki. Now, a Nephilim is a descendant, an offspring from human women and the Anunnaki. So Anunnaki was, as I say, 10 to 12 foot tall. So once they had relationships, they had offspring, and they became giants, the offspring, and they were called Nephilim. And we know that because the bones from Smithsonian, etc., that it was hidden, and the information that's given to us in ancient texts, cutting down to size, was the same size as a man, human, up to their knees. So that's how big the Nephilim got. Angels are just workers, like military type people for the Anunnaki. So if you hear the word angel. Same goes for archangel. They're just a higher up, like a commander or a captain or something. So angels were real. If you read the original text, you can see that they're absolutely real. They're not sort of floating ghosty things. The spirits are different, but angels were just another name for military or police. And a fallen angel is an Anunnaki that had relationships with humans but shouldn't have. So the fallen is a word for sort of disowned or dishonored. Can you tell me the most destructive cataclysmic event that ever happened on the planet Earth that is not natural? Okay, so you'll probably come out with Hiroshima maybe, which was obviously terrible, but that is dwarfed by what actually happened in our past that you probably don't even know about. In fact, the Bible, although they write about it, they didn't actually quite get it right because they didn't really know what was going on. We do. So over the next few videos, I'm going to have to explain who was involved, what happened, and why. So it all starts with the Sumerians, which we know really is the Anunnaki. That's where they first set up base to help humans, the Sumeria. That's why everyone calls them Sumerians, but they were Anunnaki. And these are the ancient aliens that came down from their own planet. Now, watch my other videos if you start thinking I'm being a bit crazy, but this is all true, and we've got absolute records of this cataclysmic event. So keep watching as I go through the story. Moses, or Charlton Heston. Now actually there's some people that believe that he didn't actually even exist. Now I will get to Moses after I've done the 10 plagues and who he was and why he was found in a reed basket. But for now we'll just go along with the first plague where he touched his staff into the water and it turned red. Now the Anunnaki actually do have powerful weapons or power devices of some sort, not necessarily a staff or a rod as described by the Bible, but if you look here, yes, Poseidon, Neptune and Enki are all one of the same, and they do have these trident type things, which is why you see them all over in different locations. But really the red water was probably a thing called red tide, which is where bacteria etc and algae turn the water red. Let's use some logic here. If the giants were real in ancient times and they were the sons of gods, in other words the Anunnaki had relationships with humans, as says also in the Bible, that they ended up producing some giants. Now not everyone was a giant, you know, we had demigods etc, but not every Anunnaki descendant was a giant, and that leads me, my own personal belief, that they had gigantism. So let's have a look now. Enki just happens to have trident, Poseidon, oh yeah, trident, and Neptune are all one of the same people. And if that's the case, then that means Poseidon would have had children occasionally that were giants in Greek times, and yes, he did. There is Orion, there's Otus, and there was I'm terrible at pronunciations, Lastricius. So it all makes sense. Aphrodite in Greek times was Iana or Ishtar, same name throughout the different eras, and here is the lineage of Iana. Now if you see down here, she is the granddaughter of Enlil, which would have been Zeus. So let's look at Aphrodite in the Greek period. They've got her down as the daughter, not granddaughter. So you could argue, well, that's possibly wrong. So, but why did they even leave Mesopotamia and go to Greek? Well, that's actually covered in a video on my Patreon page called Where Did the Anunnaki Go? So if you want to watch a long video talking about that, you can. So let's have a look at the differences between Iana and Aphrodite. Iana, Mesopotamia's goddess associated with love, beauty, sex, war, justice, etc. And Aphrodite is pretty much the same, with war, etc., which is very interesting. The Pyramid of Menera, as pronounced probably wrong there. Now this isn't a pyramid, let's be honest. There's no blocks, there's no solid blocks like there would be with the Great Pyramid, and I suggest it's a tomb just like this. Now imagine if this was all destroyed. You would have thought, because of the base pile of rubble, you would have said, oh well, that was a pyramid, but it's not, it's a tomb. And I suggest this was actually a tomb just like this, not a pyramid. and inside that pyramid was a sarcophagus like this. Now inside that sarcophagus was supposedly this mummy. Now actually it never had any wrappings around it, which makes it not really a mummy. And the reason why I don't even think it's the correct person is that hair there was done for a younger person, according to historians, so it wouldn't have actually matched the person who they believe was the person there, Mare. Now if you look here, even scholars thought it was just some burial. In other words, it wasn't a mummy until later on now believe the mummy. Yes, but it wasn't a mummy originally, it was just a burial, which is interesting. And you know, we could say, well, let's go and have a look to see who this person really was. Let's do some DNA testing, let's do some testing. However, there was never any photographs of this in that sarcophagus, which makes you wonder why. Then you say, okay, well, at least we got the body. You know, this is the oldest known mummy, even though it's not really a mummy, oldest known mummy in history. Where is it? Which museum's got it? Well, they lost it shortly after. What do you mean they lost it? In other words, I'm saying this was never in there, and this was taken a picture of from someone else, which is why it doesn't actually match. And as you know, they do lie. Archaeologists lie all the time, unfortunately, such as the person that faked this cartouche on Khufu's pyramid, which has now been proven to be fake. So you can't trust an archaeologist because they obviously want notoriety, which is why they actually do it. So this is my opinion of that non-pyramid, which really is just a tomb. This is a depiction of Enkidu, who was a creation created possibly by Enki, who was an Anunnaki leader, and Enki also created humans, so we know Enki did mess around with DNA. If Enki is the same person as Poseidon in Greek times, then possibly Poseidon might have created creatures if they were one of the same people. But who else did Enki create other than humans and Enkidu? Well, also the Bull of Heaven, which some people believe is the Minotaur. Now, if Poseidon is Enki, did Poseidon create any creatures? Well, funny enough, they did. So he did. So here's a list here: dolphins, octopus, etc., that Poseidon created. Now, is that a coincidence? Both of them, both gods, creating creatures? Medusa. Do you really know her? Well, I thought I'd go through some of the ancient Greek stories. Now, that sometimes there are more than one version of a story, but let's go through Medusa's. So in one version, she is a very attractive lady, and she would tend to Athena's temple, in other words, looking after her, etc. And one day Athena got upset that she was so pretty that everyone was actually going to see Medusa instead of Athena's temple, but nothing actually happened until Poseidon, which possibly could be Enki, came along and forced himself on her on the throne of Athena's temple, which caused Athena to be very upset with Medusa, even though it wasn't her fault. Literally, Poseidon did naughty bad things and he shouldn't have. So Medusa was cursed by Athena, and I'll tell you in the next video what happens next. After Medusa was forcefully attacked by Poseidon on the altar of Athena's temple, Athena became very angry that her temple was now violated. So Athena then put a curse on Medusa, causing Medusa to have snakes in her hair and turn people to stone. Now Athena banished her, and obviously Medusa left there, and Medusa was out in the wilds for a long time, wandering around, and eventually, you know, obviously unfortunately killing many people that tried to kill her, you know, just by looking at them. And eventually she came across this old derelict building, and she went into the derelict building and she stayed there, but what she found was that she wanted to clean it up, and as she cleaned it up, it turned out it was an old Athena temple, one that so she started to look after it. I'll tell you more in the next video. Following on from my last two videos about Medusa, Perseus was sent by King Polydectes to chop her head off, and he was also given a mirrored shield from Athena, sandals of gold wings from Hermes, and a sword from Hephaestus. And when he finally reached Medusa, he used the shield to reflect an image so he wouldn't look directly into her face, and managed to chop off her head, which he then returned back to give to Athena. Now, interestingly, it was Athena that gave him the shield. So what we've got is this young lady, Medusa, who was very pretty, was basically, she didn't like her because she was too pretty, and she ended up helping Perseus by giving him the shield to kill Medusa. So it's kind of a sad story, that version of it anyway. Rh negative blood comes from the Anunnaki, which is also the Greek gods, the Roman gods, the Egyptian gods, etc. And their offspring have Rh negative, and they obviously bred with humans and eventually either diluted, or some people still have Rh negative, which is a blood type that actually kills babies, which is a foreign blood type. No other species has that type of blood that will actually kill their own babies. Now, this numpty website here, the Tech Interactive, literally says that it's an ordinary trait because there's quite a lot of people with it. So in fact, there works out to be 1,200,000,000 people with Rh negative, because that's normal then. But hang on a minute, there's 1 billion disabled people. Does that make that normal? If you're interested in finding out more about Rh negative, on TikTok, Blue Moon Sigma, follow that person. This person tells you absolutely everything you ever need to know about blood types. When I was in Greece researching, and yes, I don't just sit at home researching, I was talking to the lady, the tour guide in the museum, because from the museum you can actually see the Acropolis, and the lady was saying that the pillars here were made deliberately into sections instead of one solid piece, which they could have done one solid piece, but they did them in sections. And she said there was a bar of some description inside going up, and she said that was done so that if there was earthquakes, the building would shake but wouldn't totally crumble, and in other words, it made it earthquake proof, which I found really interesting, because when you actually then look how often Greece has any kind of earthquake, here it says every 2 to 3 days. Some of them obviously so minor you can't feel it, but I mean, what kind of people thought ahead like that? Amazing. You are not going to believe this coincidence. So it just so happens that the 12 gods of Anunnaki times, in other words Mesopotamia, they love to wrestle naked, and it's written in their stone tablets, and this was part of their heritage. Now, when the Anunnaki stopped writing, e.g. there was not much more talk about them in Mesopotamia, it's about 3000 BC, just so happens 12 other gods that looked the same height as the Anunnaki and looked the same and even wore the same sort of clothes, suddenly appeared in Greece. What a coincidence that was. And they actually also wrestled naked. What a coincidence. Do you think it's a coincidence, or you think they're one of the same people? Hang on. If the ancient Greeks wrestled naked, and that was because of their 12 gods, which I think were the Anunnaki gods, same gods, then if I'm right, then the location of Sumer, which was Mesopotamia, which predates Greece, would also have wrestling, because they wouldn't have just started wrestling in Greece, would they? Well, actually, I'm right. Yes, this text here literally talks about wrestling in Mesopotamian times, which predates the Greece times, and here is actually a depiction of wrestlers wrestling. Now these ones here actually had belts, so they did that, which is very similar to sumo wrestlers. So sometimes they did have belts, sometimes they didn't. So the coincidences of 12 gods from Greece, 12 gods from ancient Sumer, both enjoying wrestling. Come on, is it just me? Tell me at the end of this video whether I'm being stupid. So basically there's 12 Greek gods, 12 Anunnaki gods, and 12 Roman gods. Now there's a bit of a coincidence there. Now when you actually look at what the Romans did, they actually did pretty much everything the Greek gods did, and that is because the Greek gods were around prior to the Roman gods. In other words, when the Greek gods weren't around anymore in Greece, they ended up in Rome, which would give you the 12 gods. Otherwise, we've now got 3 sets of 12 different gods that all just so happen to look the same. Is it me, or were they all the same Anunnaki gods? This is going to blow your mind. This is a Greek temple. Now, if you roll back the clock 6,000 years, it actually matches up with the front of it to the Pleiades star system. Now, hang on, this gets even better. Now, look, this Egyptian temple, if you roll it back 12,000 years, because it's a different angle, it matches the Pleiades. Wait for it, wait for it. And this housing estate, if you roll back 6,500 years, because of obviously the angle of it, it matches the Pleiades star system. Okay, so really what I'm saying here is when you do research and you keep coming across people saying, oh, if you go back thousands of years, it matches a particular time, Orion, Pleiades, etc., then it's just people rolling back the clock. Do not pay much attention to it. You could do it with anything, which is what I was just trying to prove there. I mentioned in my last video that if you was in ancient Greece and had muscles, then you would be worshipped. Now, part of that would be men oiling you up. If you had muscles, you would have men doing the oiling. And then you would walk down the street naked. And that was a good sign that you were almost like a hero to the people. Even if it was a cold day, you would be worshipped as you walked down naked because you had muscles. In ancient Greece, they did actually have dumbbells as well as other apparatus that they would use to lift repeatedly to be able to get those muscles. The reason why the Anunnaki didn't really have muscles, even though they were well built, is because, in my opinion, it was the demigods, the younger ones, the sons of the Anunnaki, that found fame and fortune in having muscles compared to their fathers, who are now old. I thought I'd read out Hesiod's account of Zeus in ancient Greek times. Now, if you take this as prior, what I'm about to read, as prior to ancient Greece times, in other words, it happened in Mesopotamian times, then I think it makes a lot more sense. In other words, in Greek times, they were writing about stuff that happened back even further than the Greek times. Okay, here we go. Now, all the gods were divided through strife. So before the flood, yes, there were warring factions, as we know, especially with Marduk. For every time for at that very time Zeus, who thunders on high, was meditating marvellous deeds, even to mingle storm and tempest over the boundless earth. Could that be the flood? And already was hastening to make the utter end of the race of mortal men, e.g. the flood. Now, if you go back to where it says meditating, we know that in the ancient Sumerian text it talks about Enlil, which is Zeus, having a dream and seeing Galzu tell him what's going to happen. So is this meditation actually talking about that, knowing that the utter end of mortal man? And then it goes on, declaring that he would destroy the lives of the demigods. Now, bearing in mind, demigods would have also been the Nephilim. So if you go along with the conclusion that the gods, Anunnaki, had relationships with humans and then had children with those, some of those, not all of them, some of them become Nephilim, in other words giants, compared to the other offspring that they had, but all of them would have been classed as demigods in ancient Greece. Anyone that was, even the Nephilim would have been demigods. That the children of gods should not mate with wretched mortals, in other words, exactly what I just said, seeing their fate with their own eyes, but that blessed gods henceforth, even as foretime, in other words, being told in advance, which is what I was just talking about, should have their living and their habitations apart from men. But those who were born of mortals and of mankind, verily Zeus laid toil and sorrow upon sorrow. So basically, I think this is talking about something that happened in ancient times. What do you think? How am I doing so far on persuading you that the Anunnaki aliens were in fact the same 12 Greek gods and in fact Roman gods when I get to Roman times? Now, the pine cones were a symbol of fertility by Romans, Greeks, Assyrians and Christians, but what they don't mention here is the Anunnaki. And it also says that they're associated with the third eye enlightenment and the pineal gland. Now, the ancient Greeks did actually carry these pine cone type things around with them. But did the Anunnaki? Absolutely. The Anunnaki have been carved with them many a time. So when I say that the Anunnaki were first, and you know, why would the Greek gods just so happen not only to look like the Anunnaki but also have the same type of pine cones? It's just too much of a coincidence now, isn't it? Or am I being stupid? Ancient Greek gods. Now, if you go along with my theory that they were the Anunnaki stopped writing about 3,000 years BC, and then the Greek gods sort of appeared after that, so that makes sense that they were one of the same. And you know, the Greek gods were 8 to 12 foot tall, and that is a real adult, not a child. And as you can see here clearly by the size difference, the Greek gods just happened to be the same size as the Anunnaki gods, 8 to 12 foot tall, and these are people, not adults with beards, not children with beards. And then Roman times, you've also got the demigods, etc., being way taller than normal people. So I'm hoping I'm convincing you that there was only one set of gods, and they technically weren't even gods, they were Anunnaki, which were aliens. How am I doing convincing you so far on all these videos? I can't do videos on Greece without mentioning the ancient Greece computer, so I'll let the BBC explain it better than I probably could.
120 years ago, sponge divers discovered a shipwreck off the tiny island of Antikythera in Greece. And what they found changed our understanding of human history forever. Among the treasure trove were marble statues, elegant vases, glistening jewellery and ancient coins, and what looked to be a hunk of corroded metal that no one knew quite what to do with.
It was not recognised at all as being anything interesting when it was discovered. It was just a corroded lump about the size of a large dictionary.
But when, in 1902, it was discovered that there were gear wheels inside it, everyone suddenly got rather excited.
This was the first shock, because anything from ancient Greece simply shouldn't have gear wheels. These were precision gears with teeth about 1 millimeter long, and this was just completely shocking.
And the Antikythera mechanism has captured the imagination of archaeologists, mathematicians and scientists ever since.
It's a dedicated calculating machine, and it uses bronze gear wheels to calculate the cycles of the cosmos being the sun, the moon, the planets, against the stars. And wind it forward 10 years, and you can know where the sun and the moon is going to be and where the planets are going to be.
The question of why the ancient Greeks created such a device has plagued experts since its discovery.
I think it was conceived as a calculating machine that would calculate the theories they had. They had astronomical theories, but could calculate those at the turn of a handle. So it would demonstrate how you could look ahead, say, what's the position of the moon going to be in 5 years' time, return the handle.
So what benefit would there have been for the ancient Greeks to know where the sun or moon would be in 10 years' time? I mean, we don't do it now. We don't sit there and say, hey Google, where's the moon in 10 years' time? But if you were the Anunnaki and you wanted to know when Nibiru, their home planet, was coming back round, and where that would be in relation to Earth, for example, that they're on, then yes, you would actually make that, because the journey is quicker to go from Nibiru to Earth and Earth to Nibiru when it's at its nearest. So you would need some sort of calculation device. Thus, I believe it was an Anunnaki device. Following on from my last video regarding the ancient Greek computer, some people have asked, was it ever built? Yes, it was. It was done via a computer and then 3D printed. So here is what the 3D version would have looked like, and then obviously done on 3D printers. And it does actually work, and it does do exactly what the people thought it would do, which is calculate where planets etc. would be in relation to other planets at a particular time in the future. So for example, if you was looking for where Nibiru would be closest to the Earth, you would use a device like this so that you could then fly off, instead of wasting an extra year going all the way to wherever Nibiru is. You'd wait to know where it's going to be at its closest to Earth, which is what I think this device was made for by the ancient Greek gods, which were the Anunnaki. This person is referring to this ancient Greek computer. First of all, it was found in a sunken ship's sink. That's what they do sometimes, unfortunately. But it doesn't mean that this was their only one. They may have had more, so that's why they could probably lose it and not feel too bad, or they built another one. And second of all, the Anunnaki weren't intergalactic. They were from our own solar system. Now, you're assuming that technical stuff such as iPhones and computers etc. is better than cogs. Now, they were further away from the sun than we are, so they would never have used solar power. So they would have had to have bought a battery here and a charging unit etc. Now, Anunnaki lived for hundreds of thousands of years. I can guarantee you this device would have lasted longer than your iPhone. So stop thinking in terms of technology, when sometimes old school methods work. Wait, this isn't another flat earth video. This is a video showing that Perry Reese, who people believe was one of the people that actually created the flat earth maps, and therefore what he done was correct, and therefore there's no globe. Now, Perry Reese was around from the 1400s to the 1500s and was a cartographer, which he made many maps. Now, keep that date in mind, because in 1492, this is the oldest known surviving globe of the Earth, in other words, round, not flat. Now, if we go here, round representations of the Earth go back to ancient Greece, which predates all of the maps that people talk about as being flat. So ancient Greece, thank you very much. When the ancient Greeks told us about their mythological past and their gods, they weren't always talking about what was happening then. They was talking about things that happened way back, so far back that it would have been in Sumerian times, which is when, for example, Zeus was Enlil. And in the Greek mythology here, it says Zeus allowed the flood, which Enlil did, and 2 people survived by building an ark. So this is in Greek time, so it just happens that they're referring to something older. Now we've got the Sumerian tablet here that literally says how Enki told Noah how to build the ark. But let's go back to Greek times and see when these mythological floods happened. 9,000 years before the time of Solon. Now if you go with the Lost Book of Enki, the time frame of the actual flood according to the Sumerians would have been about 10,000 BC before Christ, so this would actually make around about the correct time frame. Just imagine that the Greek gods were not the Anunnaki gods. So for a moment now we can just imagine that these 12 new gods suddenly appeared on Earth, and they actually would walk down the streets with the humans. Even though they were double height of the humans, they would actually sometimes even romantically involved with little humans, just like the Sumerian gods or the Anunnaki. But they were flesh and blood. But the story goes that they couldn't die. They were immortal, and you would have to chop them up into millions of pieces and they still wouldn't die. Obviously that's a story that they would like to have put out there as an alien race, in my opinion, so that people would always worship them forever. Now where are they now? Why aren't they on Mount Olympus? I will be doing videos soon on where the Anunnaki, or as you can see, I believe they were the Anunnaki gods, where they all went, so keep watching. While I'm talking about ancient Greece, there seems to be, certainly amongst the gods, an appetite for them to have relationships with their own kind. So for example, man, man, woman, woman. There is no descriptions that I'm aware of that sort of basically says that there is anything else other than a man and a woman. You know, there's nothing to sort of suggest that there's 100 different genders. They just basically did what they wanted to do. As with the Sumerian gods, you find that they would, you know, marry their half sister and have relationships with their uncle and so on and so on. And so this, in my opinion, does seem to conclude once again that the Anunnaki, just so happens that the Greek gods do the same things that the Anunnaki gods do, which is why I still say they were one of the same. No ancient gods were egotistical, were they? Well, actually, yeah, they were. So the Anunnaki, there's many stories where they would say things like, if you, in other words, to another Anunnaki, for example Marduk, if you did X, Y and Z, you will be written down on Nibiru as a hero for the rest of your life. Now that's something that they actually wanted, but obviously that's just the Anunnaki. The Greek gods wouldn't have done the same thing, would they? Yes, they did. They wanted everything written down, and they wanted themselves to be heroes, which is kind of weird, because obviously what just so happens the same gods that the Anunnaki want to do the same things. Well, then you've got the Roman gods, which again are really, let's be honest, the Anunnaki gods. And again, they wanted their stories written down, they wanted their carvings, their statues. So ego gods. The Greek god Atlas holding up a globe, Earth, and that ends the flat Earth theory. However, he's not supposed to be holding up an Earth, he's supposed to be holding up heaven or sky, which really is, as we know, heaven means space. So if you go back and read the Bibles, etc., just translate the word heaven with space and everything becomes so much clearer. Now Atlas was forced to hold up this heavens until Heracles, or Hercules also known as, came along, and Atlas tricked him into holding it for him. Now the reason why I'm saying all of this is because, just like the Egyptians, their stories, the Greek stories, unlike the Sumerian stories, they are so embellished. You know, for example, for a Greek to say I was walking down the shops, they would make such a big thing about it. You know, oh, there was this giant, there was this, that and the other. So it really embellished their stories, in my opinion. The ancient Greek god Zeus looks just like this man, and he is Hugh Grant, and that's because Netflix is producing a mythological thriller series based on Zeus, the Greek god, and it's a star-studded series that they're going to be producing, and it has Janet McTeer, never heard of him, David something or other, never heard of him, Cliff Curtis, never heard of him, basically people I've never heard of before, so I don't know why it's star-studded, but hey, but it's good that they're actually breaking into the Greek mythology, or history as we know it. Now bear in mind, I am hopefully trying to do, it will be a series of 4 feature films based on the Anunnaki, and the 4th will be based in Greece because of the connection between the Anunnaki and the Greek gods and the Roman gods. So if it all comes to fruition, hopefully my film will be just as good as their series. Before I do deep videos into the afterlife of the ancient Greeks, I find it funny how, you know, Egyptians and Greeks and Romans, etc., all believed in afterlife, and yet modern times we're more skeptical than ever. Now, the interesting thing is the ancient Greeks did actually visit Egypt, so you've got to ask yourself, why weren't they mummifying things like the Egyptians? Because they were there from at least 7th century BC. And I think the reason for that is, by the time the Greeks' civilization had started, which was some couple of thousand years after the sort of times that the Egyptians had their mummification processes, etc., I think the novelty of the afterlife and how to get to it had probably wore off, and they probably realised that the mummification doesn't actually do anything different, and thus the Greeks just buried people as normal. Greek mythology, everything was a lie. They just all made up all these stories about the Kraken. Hang on a minute. The Kraken was a giant squid that could actually pull down boats. Now, is there such a thing that might not be a myth? Well, we have the giant squid, and luckily we have this because they get washed up on the shores. But I mean, our ones are absolutely massive, but could they have been older, say 100,000 years ago, or even 3,000 years ago? Well, yes, they could have been bigger, but over time whaling and shipping, etc., could have killed off the largest ones. So was the Greek myth of a kraken really just a myth, or was it a giant squid maybe taking down slightly smaller boats than we imagine, but it still could be a possibility? In Greek mythology, Hades was what we would call hell. So how come we haven't got a more modern version of hell? I mean, hell, the actual word, is derived from an Anglo-Saxon word dating back to 725 AD, Anno Domini. But that's not a modern word. Again, everything we're taking from the word underworld or hell is ancient, really, in the big scheme of things. Even the North had an underworld called Nephilim. I'm terrible at pronunciations. The Egyptians had a place called Duat. Even Hinduism had a place called Nark. I'm terrible at pronunciations. But the point is, all these different places had what they would call hell, and yet more modern times, why can't we just have one? Because we've never, obviously, no one's ever been there recently, but yet in the past they did. How come? The Greek demigod Hercules, or Heracles, was known for his immense strength. Now, who would win a battle between him and the Norse god Thor? Now, Hercules is a demigod, which means his dad was a god and his mother was mortal, whereas Thor, he was pure god, Asgardian. Now, although the Marvel comics will show you that in 50% of the battles that they've had, Hercules wins and 50% Thor wins. If you go by the actual stats and information that's available to us for real life, you can probably guess who would win. It would be Thor. Now, let's not forget a quick mention to Samson, who was the strongest in the Bible. Again, though, Thor would win. So Greeks, unfortunately, the Norse god has beat you on this occasion. Some things you may or may not know about Hercules. Now, originally he in Greek should be called Heracles, and in Rome Hercules. In fact, his father Zeus had a wife called Hera. Now, she was not his mum, even though some people do think that Hercules' mum was Hera. That was his stepmum. Zeus had a relationship with a human woman called Alcmena, who then gave birth to, well, his name was actually Alcides at the time, but because Zeus was upset that Hera was upset, he decided to change Alcides' name to Heracles to match Hera, his real wife. Now, Hercules' sister, half-sister, is Athena, who gives him a sword on one of his journeys. So there's a whole lot more to Hercules I'll go through in the next video. Poor old Hercules, or Heracles. I thought I'd go through the labours of Hercules, because there's supposed to be 10, but he ended up doing 12, and I'll go through those individually. Now, he was actually supposed to be the rightful heir to the land that he was at, but unfortunately Hera made sure, that was his stepmom, made sure that his cousin was prematurely born, therefore taking the position that Hercules would have had. So anyway, Hercules obviously was annoying people, including Hera, and she decided to turn him a bit mad. So he went round and, believing that he would see monsters, etc., start hacking them to pieces. And then one day he thought the monsters that was in his house were his monsters, but they weren't. They were actually his wife and daughter. So he killed them, and so therefore he wanted to atone for his sin. After Hercules was tricked by his stepmom Hera to kill his own family, he went to the Oracle of Delphi to try and atone for his sins, and the oracle suggested that he serve Eurystheus. But little did he know that the oracle was actually being controlled by Hera. So anyway, he went to see Eurystheus, who gave him 10 tasks, which eventually ended up being 12, but I'll cover that later. So the first task was to go and stop a giant lion and kill it. So after a huge battle, he finally won. He managed to strangle this giant lion, and using the lion's own claw, he managed to skin the lion and use the lion's coat as his own armour. So that was the first of the 10/12 labours of Hercules. I'll carry on the next video. The second task for Hercules was to kill a 9-headed hydra, probably bigger than this, more like this size. And this hydra was actually raised by Hera in order to kill Hercules one day. And Hercules took his nephew Aeolus with him to a lake called Leron. I'm terrible at pronunciations. The Hydra actually breathed poison, so it was very difficult for them to fight. Every time Hercules would cut off one head, 2 would grow back in its place. Eventually, Aeolus used his bow and arrow and used fire at the actual cut mark to stop, you sort of cauterize it to sort of stop 2 heads growing up back in its place. Hera then sent a giant crab to help the Hydra. I'll have to finish this off on the next video, it's running out of time. This video is continuing on from the last video regarding Hercules and his second task. Now, this one was to kill a Hydra raised by Hera. Now, when Hera found out that the Hydra was losing the battle, she sent a giant crab to try and help the Hydra and kill Hercules. That didn't work. Hercules managed to destroy the giant crab with ease. Now, to kill the Hydra, they needed to find the one true mortal head. They did it, and when I say they, him and Aeolus. And using the golden sword given to him by his half-sister, he managed to kill the Hydra. He went back to Eurystheus, who then said, that doesn't count, you had help with Aeolus, therefore this task is void. So that's why Hercules ended up with 12 tasks. There's another one later on where he also discounted, so in the end Hercules done 12. This is going to change the way you think of a lot of things. So in Greece, ancient Greece, we had Cyclops, we had many different types of half this and half that creatures, and of course we call them myths. Now these are cylinder seals here that were from Sumerian times, which predate the Greece times, the ancient Greece times, by thousands and thousands of years. And these actually have, for example, here is a Cyclops. So this predates, so this means that the Sumerians actually knew about Cyclopses. Now, there is other cylinder seals that also have half this and half that creatures, including harpies, which really then does prove that, in my opinion, that Enki was messing around with DNA, creating, and that's why Enki ends up being Poseidon, who also then created half this and half that creatures. And actually in Sumerian text it talks about Enki saying humans, or Adamu, is his favourite creature. I have some excellent smart people following me, which is great. So this person here has actually beat me to the gun. So I was going to be talking about the constellations, because the last video that I did regarding Hercules talked about Hercules having to fight a Hydra and then a crab that was sent by Hera, his stepmom. And as this person's jumped the gun, I thought I'd do the videos now. So basically, if you've watched my previous videos, you'll see that I prove that the ancient Greeks sometimes talk about things that actually happened thousands of years before the ancient Greeks, and they're actually talking about things that happened in Sumerian times. Now we know the Sumerians dealt with calendars because of the henges that surround the world, and actually the stone tablets talk about it. So when you've got the Hydra constellation, and they do, the Anunnaki did talk about constellations, and the crab constellations, maybe that's what they were talking about. The third task of Hercules, or Heracles, was he had to capture the Sumerian hind, which was kind of like a stag, very fast, had gold horns. And when he finally caught it after a year of chasing it, the goddess Artemis came down, because she actually used it to help pull her chariot. Now bearing in mind, back in the olden days, chariots used to be the word for spaceship, which is why you got Eric von Donikin's book Chariots of the Gods. But they also did actually also use proper chariots as well. But anyway, so Artemis, the goddess, was upset that Hercules was taking it. She had a chat with her twin brother Apollo. They both worked out that Hera was the one that was pulling all the strings deliberately to make sure that Hercules would fail these tasks. So they allowed Hercules to take this Sumerian hind, as long as once he proved that he captured it, he would release it, which he did. The fifth labour for Hercules was to clean out stables that belonged to King Agarus. I'm probably pronouncing that terribly wrong. And basically he had over 3,000 cattle and hadn't been cleaned for 30 years. So Hercules had to clean it. Now what he done was he actually rerouted the rivers to actually wash away all the dung from these cattle, and in return he was promised that if he could do it within a day, the king promised him a portion of his cattle. But when the king realized how Hercules had done it, he refused to honor his agreement. Actually later on Hercules ended up killing him anyway, but that's another story. So when Hercules went back to Eurystheus, he refused also to say that it was one of the labours, so it didn't count because he was accepting payment for it. Guardian angels. I'm carrying on here with Dolores Cannon, who in the last video actually kind of admitted that the word angel might not be correct, because she says, or whatever you want to call it. So obviously we know that the word angel in ancient Sumerian times basically means Anunnaki. Watch my previous videos if you want to know more on that.
When they comes into a life, is never alone. They have a guardian angel that's assigned to them.
So they have a guardian spirit, which is from plane 3 of existence. If you watch my videos, you'll know what I'm on about that.
When they come into the life, they have to be with you your entire life. The guardian angel takes care of you and is there to assist you. It cannot interfere,
I agree.
but it's there to assist you. But most people think they're alone, and they don't know there are guardian angels that are assigned to you when you come in.
So that's true. So although you have a soul group, and no, not a soulmate, you actually have a soul group of at least 6 other light being entities that join with you. And bearing in mind, when she's talking about these guardian, her words, angels, but obviously we know they're guardian spirits, what she's not actually saying is they're not there for you per se. They're there for the spirit that's with you, the light energy being that joined with you 3 to 4 months while you was in the womb, and it joins with your pineal gland. They're there to help that, not you. Obviously, if you die, then that light energy being leaves your body and doesn't learn everything it needs to learn. So technically, they're not there for you. You are just a blip in their eternity. Absolutely just a blip. But to help them, they help you, and you think they're helping you when really they're helping the light energy being that's inside you.
And they can't interfere. So they said, if you don't ask us for assistance, we don't have anyone to assist. So they like it if you can talk to them and tell them what you want, and they will take it and they will run with it. They will do miracles if they know what it is you want.
And that's kind of true, because obviously the spirit that's with you is with you to learn. That's all it is there for. And obviously if you're just sitting there doing nothing all day long and not having asked them for help in anything, you know, in relationships or anything, then they don't know how to help you for your spirit that's inside to learn from you. So I hope that all makes sense.